Hello and welcome. My name is Phoebe Lewis and I'm the Associate Producer of the Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival. And I am pleased to welcome you to our recorded panel featuring the cast and crew of Personal Statement, featuring the director Julie Dresner, producer Beth Levison, and students Enoch Jamat and Caroline Jimenez. This was the last in our series in which we sat down with MNFF directors, producers, actors, set designers, and more to learn more about the life of their film and their career post-festival. For those of you who attended the Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival in 2018, you'll likely remember the inspirational, dynamic feature documentary Personal Statement. The director, producer, and two key students actually attended the festival in its entirety, and I personally remember how meaningful it was to share the festival with them. We are pleased to welcome them back for this panel. We hope you enjoyed the sneak peek into the fascinating world of high-impact documentary filmmaking. By the way, as you watch the webinar, I encourage you to remember the date August 1. This is the date that tickets and passes for the 6th annual Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival goes on sale, and as you may have seen, this year's festival is going online. We are so excited to share a robust, inspiring, and beautiful lineup of films with you this year, and you can access them all from the comfort of your home. So sit back and relax and enjoy the Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival from your couch. There's more coming your way soon.
Okay, let's go ahead and start. People will come in as we go. So again, now that you all can see who's here, let me sort of go around. I'm going to start in the center for a moment, and that's Julie Dresner, who is the director of Personal Statement. Below her on the screen, Beth Levison, who is the producer of Personal Statement and other films that we will hopefully learn about toward the end of the hour today. And then two of the principal participants, protagonists in the film, played such a huge role. To the left, Caroline Jimenez, and on the right, Enoch Jamat. And in the top right corner, our associate producer, Phoebe Lewis, and in the top left, our artistic director, Jay Craven, who will take over from here. Jay, take it away.
Okay. It occurs to me that probably not everybody who's tuned in here has seen the movie, but some of you have. And it's. I think we should look at the trailer, and I think it'll give people a sense of what we're talking about. And I think what is particular about the conversation we can have here tonight is the idea of the film, how it really is quite relevant at this particular moment, and what impact the film had, and how it continues to resonate and sort of spin into new dimensions that are really having a lot of influence and impact, and really addressing some. We discuss issues, but when you actually take actions and create a film that allows you to actually advance in achieving those goals, I think it's very particular. And so this conversation, I think, will focus a lot on that. So Phoebe, why don't you direct people? We're going to direct them to their chat function, but Phoebe's going to explain how we're going to do this to get you the best quality of image.
Right, so if you navigate to the chat function, which is a little speech bubble, which is in the lower bar of your screen, if you open that, you'll find a message from me that says, please see the trailer here, and a link. Just click on that link, go through, and you'll be able to watch it. It's about 1.5 minutes. Don't worry about muting, because we won't be able to hear what's going on your screen, so you'll be good to go. And then we look forward to welcoming you back in about 1.5 minutes.
You ready?
Yeah.
No, you're not ready?
I don't want to click it. You do it.
I can't.
Dana!
I want you to click it.
No.
They're looking at your GPA, and they're looking at your SAT scores, and they're looking at your personal statement.
And she's like, you might not get accepted anywhere.
I've been knocked down, I've been harassed, I've been disrespected. Everything in life is a battle. If you want something, you gotta fight for it.
What if I make the wrong choice? What if I pick the wrong school? Voy para la escuela y no vengo para atrás.
Una niña no puede andar sola en el camino.
Porque yo soy una niña.
Claro.
We're all thinking to ourselves, like, it's too much. Like, every document meant, like, life or death.
It's pretty hard to grow up in a world where you never feel good enough. You start to wonder, what did I do to deserve this?
There should be more guidance counselors. There shouldn't be one guidance counselor for each grade.
In some schools, it's like for 700 something students that have one guidance counselor.
This is why we're here. I can help you. I can do everything I can to help you.
we'll be assisting you guys with the whole college process.
Have you guys applied for college?
No, not yet.
If you want to go to college, you can.
SAT. It's sábado, mañana. I wanted to change people. And I wanted them to feel like, that they're not alone. They're all in this together.
Just seeing other people succeed is pretty cool, especially when you had something to do with it.
I just need to get myself together. I don't want to let them down. I don't want to let myself down.
Welcome, Coach McNeil.
They were making me feel like I only had one chance, and that chance was today.
It's supposed to be an enthusiastic process.
Because you're getting me upset.
You are all leaders. Leadership is about being committed to your communities, to your peers, your friends, your families, and to justice.
Back up, we want freedom.
Students have leadership. If you wanted something, why can't we get together and do it?
I think you gotta click on this one.
Little pumpkin.
Hi, I'm Enoch Jaman, and I'm calling about my application process.
Pumpkin, do you know your ID number yet?
No.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the Impact campaign, but before that, I wanted to just talk about the genesis of the film. This is a picture about these fabulous activist students, organizers, who take on the role of college counselors at their schools, based on the fact that there really are not adult college counselors, experienced college counselors to do this job, which I think is one issue that is worth thinking about. But that fortunately there are student leaders who really rise to the challenge and are able to focus on the fact of something larger than themselves. Wow, okay, what a concept that we're seeing play out in everyday life even today. And fortunately, these high schools in New York City, I mean, this is really a New York, and so there is this organized effort to find these students in respective schools to come together, be trained, and then go back into their schools and play this role. And so I guess I just wanted to know a little bit about the genesis of the film. Julie is the director of the film. Beth is the producer. So how did the idea come to you, Julie, and how did you get to Beth? And just maybe a little bit about how the project came together would be great.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was interested in doing a film about educational inequality in New York City. I was aware of just how segregated racially and economically New York City schools are, and the fact that only a small number of schools had metal detectors and armed police officers, although there are police officers in just every single public school, but some had many more, and students were being policed much more in schools than others. And I was interested in doing a film about that. And then I met one of the directors of the program, CARA, College Access Research and Action, that was training high school students to work as peer college counselors to close the college guidance gap, address the fact that there were not enough school counselors, not enough college advising otherwise available at their schools. And they were putting this extra program into the most under-resourced schools, and it was the very same schools that were also over-policed. So that was my first point of entry to it, was meeting her and learning about what they were doing. And I immediately thought, like, what better way to understand, all of the barriers that these young people are up against, than to follow young people who had decided to step up themselves and address them, not only for themselves, but for all of their peers as well. So I had met her actually just a week before the summer training began. And I said to her, I would love to make a film, but I'd need a year to raise money and prepare to do this. So let's talk again later. I can't start in a week. But somehow miraculously, we came up with a little bit of funding to start. And so she said, could we do something with a little bit of funding? And I was like, okay, we can do something. But when we showed up on the first day and we met these amazing students, we immediately realized, like, this should not be a short film. This should be a long film. And we want to do it right now. So we had to fundraise on the go as we were shooting immediately with no pre-development. So that sort of segues into how I met Beth. I was trying to do a lot all at once, filming, fundraising at the same time, and I didn't have a co-producer, and it was actually when I reached out to an editor and was explaining everything I was doing, she said, "Oh, you need to talk to Beth." That was Toby Shimon, who said, "You must talk to Beth." And then Beth came in, and maybe you can tell the rest of the story, Beth.
Yeah, I was trying to remember the whole story. And I think what happened was Julie shared the sample reel with me, and I really fell in love with Caroline and Enoch and Christine, and I just thought they were really amazing. And but I was working on another film at the time, and so I think I started consulting, and then kind of these projects, they end up just like pulling you in, and so yeah, and so then I stuck with the project for a really long time, and what they've done is, I actually think it's really exceptional and amazing what they've done with the impact and the outreach. It's really amazing.
Well, it's the kind of film in documentary filmmaking that I think you hope for, which is that you embark on a project not really knowing where it's going to lead you. And so there are surprises and discoveries all along the way. I mean, maybe you could share a little bit in terms of anything that developed that was really unexpected for you, Julie, in terms of the way that the story and the characters began to take shape.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, listen, I learned a lot in the process of making this film. And, I honestly, I didn't go in to make a film about the college guidance gap and the college process. But as I was alongside Enoch and Caroline and Christine and their peers, and watching everything that they had to deal with as they were simply applying, figuring out what schools to apply to, applying, then figuring out how to pay for school. I just realized, I remember at one point, as somebody was on the phone with some school dealing with some, detailed form for financial aid. I just remember thinking, like, this is like at least 3 times as hard as it is for students who are not figuring out how to pay for college on their own. And for students who have a school counselor who has less than a 1 to 100, ratio of, school counselor to students that they are helping. And I thought, it's as if you went out of your way to design a system to keep people out of higher ed, you would design a system that looked like this. Like, they're just absurd things. I don't know, Enoch, if you want to, and Caroline, if you want to, give some of the details, but that was like one of the things that I just honestly didn't quite understand, just from my own experience when I applied to school, what kind of support I had from my parents, my school, how much it cost at that time to go to school. Things have just gotten more complicated. And, so I don't know if you guys want to jump in and add any of some specific examples of where it was just like insanely difficult.
And to the point also of even encouraging students who should go to college, given the odds that are facing them in terms of the process of application, the process of getting the money, everything else. So yeah, let's talk a little bit with Caroline and Enoch about what your job was. What were you up against? What challenges did you face, and how did you go about it? Maybe why don't we start with Caroline? Why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone who's watching. Hello. So for me, I went to a high school that was populated by non-English speakers. So English was their second language. And there were newcomers. So they had just arrived to the US from outside countries. So in my own experience, like doing my own college application, the most difficult part for me was doing the FAFSA and the TAP and figuring out what it was, a promissory note or student loan and all the single steps that I had to go through, like the FAFSA verification process. At one point, I just felt like it was very overwhelming, and I thought to myself that I couldn't do it, you know. And as
FAFSA, just to stop for a minute, FAFSA is the sort of comprehensive document that you fill out to make you eligible for financial aid. Is that right?
It's the, I don't know if you can help me with the whole spending thing, but it's the federal aid for students, like the money that you get from the government.
Right.
And they just ask you so many questions. And it was like, oh, when do your parents got divorced? You need to know the date. And it's like so many kinds of things that I didn't know. And I never had like a close relationship with my father. So the fact that I also had to ask him for his taxes was a little weird for me during the whole situation. But then like I thought to myself how like I'm the oldest of three, and it's like I have to go through this whole demeaning and hard process so my sister and my brother won't have to go through it. And then like in terms of like my students, a lot of them, I had to convince a lot of my students to go to college, and I had to remind them why college is so important. Because at one point I also didn't want to go to college, so it was like I had to figure it out for them and figure it out for myself at the same time. But I remember talking to their parents, and you know, I had a lot of like undocumented students and their parents being afraid of getting involved in the whole college application process because they fear, right? So I think that at the end, when we all graduated and I got to see my peers and some of my students graduate, I just felt like it was so worth it. I felt like I'm just grateful for every single thing that I went through, for every single thing that I learned. Whether that was a very difficult moment, whether that was a very stressful moment, whether I wanted to add like stress as my extracurricular activity. I'm just grateful that I went through all of that, because if that hadn't been the case, then I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have today. And I wouldn't be the activist that I am today. And I wouldn't have this urge to be a leader and to use my voice and my story and my experience for those who fear, or for those whose voices and stories are being neglected. So I don't know what to say. I'm just grateful.
Yeah. And Enoch, I mean, that's, yeah, the fact of this leadership role, you find yourself, you talk about your students, right? I mean, you were a student, but you're shepherding another group of students to help push them forward. Enoch, love to hear some of your thoughts.
So yeah, that whole process alone was difficult, you know, trying to be a youth leader and assisting my peers. And it's funny because all of these panels that we're on and all the screens that we attend, it's crazy the amount of times that I have a different level of reflection when I'm like during the moment. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like, okay, what am I going to say about this situation? And I think back, like I'm a part of a seldom group of individuals, right? And I approach every moment of adversity with the most strongest sense of optimism, right? And when you ask me how my high school process was, I'm thinking that, all right, I'm a part of this optimistic group of individuals, and I was approaching everything with, you know, positivity. And I found myself being hit with barriers that were demoralizing. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is so crazy. So this panel is making me reflect on the world that we live in. And as Julie was saying before, you're just starting to realize how corrupt things things are around you. And when Julie said, like, it seems like if there was ever a system to keep students from attending school, it would be the one that we live in today. So yeah, it just to think back on it, you know, it's been a while since we've had a panel and discussed about this type of stuff. So it's just a little bit heartbreaking to just kind of remember that the system's always been jacked up, and it was jacked up when we were in it, and it's going to be jacked up for the next most amount of years. But yeah, being a youth leader had its troubling times, but it was so uplifting for me because I was like their superhero, you know, and sadly I couldn't be my superhero, but I was capable of helping my peers along their process, and I had answers to situations that they were like in states of despair at, you know. I had like a light at the end of their tunnel, so it was a very uplifting process, as hard as it was.
Yeah, and so the figure of how many students are per counselor, I think that Julie, you indicate somewhere in your website or someplace, it's like 400 and some odd students per school counselor. And then the school counselor is dealing with more than just college. Am I right about that?
That's right. The average school counselor says they can spend 20% of their time on college counseling because they have a lot of other really important roles that they play. So it's completely inadequate.
So it's impossible, really. And so this really is by necessity, if you're going to get students into college, this is the only way to do it, really. And meanwhile, the students who are in positions of leadership are learning it at the same time as the other students as they go through this process and face their own challenges of trying to get this done. And what sort of comes to mind for me, I mean, that we've just been through this whole intensive focus on the issue of Black Lives Matter as an example. You know, concretely, this is a huge area where there is need, where there is a deficit, but where there is also a solution. And you guys are the solution. And I think it really is important to know that these are the kinds of things that will change how our society works. Very little is more important. I mean, obviously, police reform is hugely important, but the idea of providing access and access to higher education is the way to really also deal with equity and to start moving in that direction. So now out of this film, you developed an impact campaign. Okay, and I'd like to know a little bit more about that and how it worked and what impact it had and just the role that the students played as well.
Okay, well, when we first started out with our impact campaign, we had kind of 3 goals. One was to get the film out to middle schools, high schools throughout the country, to directly use it to inspire students to persist to and through college. We also wanted to get it to educators and everyone who works with low-income adults to inspire them to provide more support. And then we were looking at systems change, and we were trying to get it to decision makers, legislative, elected officials, people, who are running agencies, to convince them to close the college guidance gap, fund many, many more school counselors in public schools, and address other systemic barriers to college, including like the way FAFSA works, like simplifying FAFSA is one example. So I don't know, maybe Caroline, do you want to talk a little bit about how much we traveled around the country and the impact that we saw that the film had as we did?
I'm kind of sad talking about this. Good memories. We traveled a lot. I remember the craziest thing about this and the most joyful thing that happened to me and to every single member of the film is that students after the film, they were like approach us, and I remember this one particular student, she started crying and I couldn't hold back my tears. I tried so hard. It was when we went to St. John's, Julie. I don't know if you remember. She approached me after watching the film and she started crying. She was like, I had never related to a story so much in my life. And I'm getting teary-eyed again because that meant so much to me as a person and as an advocate and as someone who's trying to change the world and society in some kind of way by using their story. It just made me realize that sharing our stories can be so powerful, that this is not about, changing one life at a time. No, we can change so many lives at one time when we share our stories and our experiences. And I also like to think to myself, going back to what Enoch said, is that the system has always been corrupted. And the only difference now is that now we can film it. So by like sharing our stories, we can shed light on the racism we face on our campuses, on the struggles that we face as a low income and student of color while doing a college application. So I wish I could go back to those days. But those are the memories I'm going to always keep and catch in the back of my heart because they changed me as a person, and I'm just happy that I was able to make the day or the life or be an inspiration for somebody who really needed it, because it just taught me that I have been there for people who have needed it so much, and I just didn't even know it.
But so we've traveled all over the country. We went to schools, universities, associations where they were having their conferences, and we went to Capitol Hill. We started doing professional development trainings and had some really powerful screenings and workshops with teachers. we have a partnership actually now with FAFSA to inform their changes. That came from one of our impact screenings. But maybe I'm going to pass it to Enoch now to talk about where this all evolved. About a year ago, we added a whole other element to our impact campaign. Enoch, you want to talk about We Belong in College?
Yes, and to add in on our amazing screenings and events, Middlebury's festival is by far my favorite festival ever that I've ever attended in my life ever. Okay, so it's up there on my list. I thank you guys for how amazing you are. So yes, as our initial impact campaign was derived from our experiences and the reactions that we received right after we screened the film. We're like, oh my goodness, we have to get it to everyone. And as we're like contemplating and figuring out how we should have this intense impact nationwide, we stumbled across this article that's written by Paul Tuff in the New York Times. And in the article, there's research that proves if a student hears a story if a student shares a story and another student hears a story, and then the student that heard a story shared their own story about a time they questioned whether they belonged, right? The chances of both of them succeeding increases exponentially, right? So like, oh my goodness. It's not only that we need to be sharing our stories with these schools, it's that we need to have students out there sharing their stories that they're coming across, the adversity that they face. And how can we do that, right? There's research that proves it, and it's super powerful, and we've experienced it firsthand, so we have to get it out there into the world. So what do? Then we came up with this idea called the We Belong in College campaign, # We Belong in College campaign. And that campaign is a social media interactive campaign where we're telling students around the world that they've questioned if they belong in college, to share that time they face adversity and how they persisted through those struggles. And we're just letting them know, like, hey, you can help a beautiful person, and you can also win $1,000 scholarship, along with money that we've raised. And helping someone is more important than the money. But yeah, it's really that's the whole idea of the impact campaign, and it just revolves around the power within stories.
Yeah, and to give a better sense of what this campaign looks like, we can share a video, the highlight reel with you if you'd like.
So Phoebe, do you want to direct people? And I hope that people are able to stream. I mean, if not, come back. I mean, sometimes your local bandwidth in Vermont is a little bit problematic. We apologize if that's the case. But the first one is 1 minute long, the highlight reel, right?
That's right. So
your chat function. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. I just shared it in the chat function. Just a quick note as well. If you have any questions during this discussion, please feel free to enter them through the Q&A function down below. This is 2 little chat bubbles. And then we'll do our best to get to all of them throughout the conversation. So please do send those in. You can find the clip in the chat function.
This is my We Belong College story. As a first-generation immigrant, it was really hard for me.
I was being bullied for being gay.
And I started to feel really inadequate.
I would think about all the negative things.
This whole process was very daunting.
I struggled so hard.
I was just mentally and physically stressed.
If I was struggling so much just to apply to college, how would I fit in college?
I started to question if I really belonged in college.
I was about to tell them that I was leaving.
I knew that I had to keep going and persevere because of my little brothers.
And that's when I also just realized I have to go to college. I want to go to college. College is going to be for me because I want that education.
I want to thank my college counselor for always being there and helping me.
Sometimes you don't see the light, but it's there.
We all do belong in college.
We truly all belong in college.
Because we deserve the best.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. And it sort of goes to what Enoch was talking about before. Through the making of Personal Statement, Caroline, Enoch, other students were able to, share their voice and also in some ways develop their voice. I mean, it seems to me that making the film probably was influential just in terms of how you began to function. And it probably contributed in some ways, being in the film, to taking on this leadership role. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. I have to say that the impact that being a part of this whole personal statements impact, it's been overwhelmingly joyful and enriching in all aspects of it, of that word, you know. So yeah, I've been learning so much about myself and so much about the world that I live in. I don't know. I will run for president after this sometime.
There you go. We need you for sure.
I have no problem.
Yeah. And so what you're saying then is that with other students, provided this campaign hashtag we all belong in college, hashtag I'm sorry, we hashtag we belong in college. You're expanding the number of students whose voices are now partly through media, but also through the program itself, that their stories are important. And I think that, you know, Caroline, when you earlier said that somebody came up to you when she was in tears and it meant so much to her, I think that this process of film that is about young people in transition, in motion, moving to make their own futures, they see themselves in the people that are on screen, and to the point where they can actually be on screen too through this extension that you've brought to the picture, that you're on screen in personal statement. Somebody in the audience says, you know, that's me. She's speaking for me. You know, and I think that's what's really extraordinary about it.
Absolutely. And I don't know, like the campaign is so great because mostly right now during these times, like it just feels so crazy right now in the world. And today is probably just going to be as crazy, but it gives me hope because we're still there for each other, even if it is virtually. Because again, sharing our stories and our experiences are a quick way to bring us closer to each other and to help us be there for someone who needs it in a corner around the world, and we're just not aware of it. So I think that's also one pretty cool aspect of the We Belong in College campaign.
Okay, so what do you all do? I'm just curious also, we can get to Julie, I want to hear what you have to say, but also just what role are you playing? What are you doing in this campaign? But Julie, go ahead.
Oh no, you guys can answer that first. I can add what I was going to say later.
You can start, Enoch.
Okay, so in the campaign, I am the Impact Campaign Leader. And along with that just comes with, you know, Impact Campaign Leader stuff, you know, figuring out next steps and trying to articulate and make your messages very coherent to the people that you're trying to get across to, like students. And I'm also like, I don't know, we're a little bit the face of it. You know, we make a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, we create a lot of videos, a lot of stuff to put out on social media. We're also like the ones who like grade the We Belong in College stories, along with Julie and members of the guest school. So yeah, we do a lot of pretty things. I think it's pretty cool. Like I'm not really a fan of social media and stuff, but like now that I am doing it through the campaign, it feels pretty cool to see the impact that social media can have on such a good cause.
Mm-hmm.
So in the campaign, you are asking students to create a video of their own that they send to you. And based on the video that they send to you, you select some of them and give $1,000 scholarships to the students whose videos you select. Is that how it works?
Yeah, they're not only giving them to us, right? They're posting them on their own social media, so it's public. So the idea is that they are sharing their story with students everywhere. So anybody can just put into Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the hashtag We Belong in College and find hundreds of stories, and they can see, students throughout the country can see that they're not alone, right? Because a part of the research showed that the difference between students who make it through college and the ones who don't, I mean, the thing that's not different is everybody struggles, right? Everyone who goes to college struggles at the beginning, and it takes a while to figure things out. The difference between the people who persist and the ones who don't is some look around and say, oh, I'm struggling, everyone else is fine, maybe I don't belong, and they leave. But if you understand that you're not alone, everyone is struggling, and you just need to get the strategies to be able to persist. And that's what the students are sharing. They're sharing the story of like, number one, I struggled, everyone struggles, you're not alone, and here's how I got through it. So you can see them on social media. We are also making them available on the WeBelongInCollege.com website, and you can see all of the different stories, and they're categorized by type of stories. So students can go there and look for the types of stories that they might be more likely to relate to.
One thing I'm wondering, and I think Phoebe has a question that she wants from our audience, but to what extent do you face issues of it's not cool to go to college among students? That, hey, I'm not that kind of, student that wants to do all this stuff. I mean, what kind of resistance do you find in terms of students who just think that, in terms of the people that, who might be their friends, that this is, no, that's not for us, blah, blah, blah. I mean, what kind of resistance do you find like that? Any? Or do you find that most students actually want the opportunity if you can help direct them through it?
That is a very good question. I still remember. I think that, and I'm going to speak not entirely for every single student of color or for every single low-income student, but I think that from the high school that I graduated from and from the community that I come from, I think that we all have the dream of going to college. We all have like academic goals that we want to accomplish, and we know that college is the way to do that. But I did come across a lot of students in my high school who said, I don't want to go to college. I don't need to go to college. I can just work. And they always base it on like every single person who got a good job and didn't go to college, or every single famous person who's now famous and popular and didn't need a college degree. And I just like to tell them that that college, I believe that every single person is capable of achieving their dreams as long as they put effort, as long as they want it bad enough. It doesn't matter how bad it is, even if it takes time. But I always used to respect that. One thing about me is that I always used to respect the choices that my students make. The way that I like to put it is that I offer them the options, but they were the ones to make their choices. And I understand too that we're also afraid. College for a lot of parents who do not live here and are not from America can be very fearing and challenging. And I'm also speaking from my own mom, who never truly understood what it was like for me to take out a parent plus loan. The fears that she faced when it came to that, so like the fact that they don't know can be very scary for a lot of these students. And then imagine like high school is already hard enough, and then we start thinking about how even harder college is going to be and how most of us will probably not survive it or get through it. So I just always used to remind them that they can and they will. They will make it as far as they want to because they already made it this far. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Again, you can create a sort of supportive culture that surrounds students and is affirmative and shows them, yes, that connectedness. Everybody has this need for connection, and this work that you're doing is creating that possibility. Yeah. So Phoebe, you have a question.
Yeah, we have a couple questions coming in, and one actually speaks to what you were just talking about, Caroline. This comes from Rachel. She's wondering, what do you think is the most important role in high school guidance counselors or other high school staff and community members? What can they do to make sure that middle school and high school students have the resources that they need to fill out the forms that you were discussing, the FAFSA, letters of notoriety, as you said? What can they do to make sure that they're really being supportive in a logistical sense?
Well, so to everyone who has watched the film, I don't want to give out details for the people that haven't watched it, but I always like to talk about like Irma as being like my savior, as being like my big sister, my supervisor, my role model, my I don't know, my to go to person wherever I encounter, whenever I needed guidance. One of the thing about Irma is that she was trained to be a college counselor. She had that knowledge. And she was just so supportive in the fact that she was always looking after me. She was always making sure that I wanted it. She was always making sure that I had the guidance that I needed to go through the process. And if I had a question or if I wasn't sure, she always had this method of giving me like a 30-second hug, which I used to hate, but now I miss so much. So I think it varies from person to person. I mean, Enoch and also talking about this because this guidance counselor, his college counselor, wasn't the most supportive in a way. But just being there for your students says a lot. Asking them how they're doing, knowing that when a student says that they don't want to go to college, there's always a reason behind I don't want to go to college. There's always a tone of fear, a tone of awareness, a tone of I don't know if I can make it, and they just need to be reassured that they are, because somebody at some point in their life has doubt themselves, and they have doubt that they can make it somewhere, and they just need to be reminded that they can, and that they're worth it, and that they're capable of achieving absolutely anything. So just being supportive, telling your students, hey, it's okay, even reaching out to their parents if you have to, because sometimes I believe that parents play a big role when it comes to students applying to college and the college that they decide to go to. So having that kinds of conversations with the parents to create a support system for the students so that college can become a reachable goal and a reachable dream for them mean a lot to them, and it meant a lot to me, and I know that it's going to mean a lot to a lot of students out there.
Cool. Yeah.
But then, Nina, I know you can also add into this because you're, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I can answer a little bit of that question too. And yes, of course, your college counselor is super imperative in your process. My college counselor, as you said, Caroline, was a poopy head, for and there's this atmosphere that I think needs to be created, the college going atmosphere. It should always be like, oh, if I got into the community college, that means I'm not as good as my friend who got into UCLA. You know what I mean? So there's one thing tackling atmosphere inside your schools, but in FAFSA specifically, if FAFSA doesn't plan on reforming its diction and things like that, I guess, having like a specific pamphlet that tackles all the interesting terms that are used in the FAFSA that is explained in an articulate way for students to comprehend it. And that's, if FAFSA is not going to change, then you have to make these little tips and tricks within your community to make FAFSA easier for everyone, like as in for everyone, like parents, students, teachers, college counselors, so yeah.
And I just want to add, and I like to talk about this a lot, is that when students don't have the kind of support that they need at home, they try to look for that support in school, whether that is in their teachers, whether that is in their school's principal, or whether that is in their college counselor. So a college counselor, it might not seem that way, but trust me, we are grateful for you. We are grateful that you exist. And the reason that is because we get support from you. We get that companionship, that, okay, you're my role model, and I can always go to you whenever I need something. So yeah.
No, it's extraordinary. I mean, really, the idea of this leadership being shown by young people to really define the moment for their peers and say, look, we can push it ahead. I mean, this is the kind of impact from filmmaking that, is enough to justify, movies everywhere that can really change the conversation and change the action and open doors for people to be able to accomplish things they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And through your We All Belong in College campaign, you're just proliferating it out. Now, who raises the money for the scholarships? Who stands behind all of this?
Our funder for the We Belong in College campaign is the Gates Foundation. And in addition to providing the funding for the scholarships, they're providing the support for our time to work on this, but then also they're making 1,500 free copies of the film available to educators who want to use the curriculum that we developed. So there's a We Belong in College curriculum, and what it involves is it involves the teacher, the educator, showing to, it could be high school students, it could be college students, showing them the film, but letting them know before they see the film that they're seeing the film because they're then going to be asked to share their own story. So they see the film and then they learn about the We Belong in College campaign, and then they are sort of walk through the process of creating their own story and sharing their own story. And so if there's any educators listening out there, you want to help us spread the word, go to webelongincollege.com, go to the resources for educators, and you'll see the link to get the curriculum and to ask for the free copy of the film.
Okay, great. Okay, I want to get to Beth, but there may be one more question that you have, Phoebe. So let's try to.
Sure. So we have another question. This is for you, Enoch. This comes from someone in the audience wondering, quote, I see the New York Times and other news outlets interviewed you when the film came out. Did you get a sense that the reporters understood where you were coming from, or did some not quite understand the overwhelming odds that you faced when applying to college?
It's a really good question, and I'd have to say no. I would, yeah, I feel like the individuals that did report me, like CBSN and if you're referring to New York Times, when I wrote that op-ed, and all the other, reporters that I've met, you'd always get like statements like, I went through the same thing back in my day when I was going through college, so there was always empathy that dwelled in our conversation. So I felt like they understood that I was there for them, and the feeling was mutual.
Okay.
We do have one last question, if we could address that before moving on. Does that work?
Yep.
Great. So this is more to Beth and Julie. This anonymous person says, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you all. They're wondering if any of you would like to talk about what it was like to make a documentary with a white director and producer in schools with significant student of color populations, especially about an issue that often disproportionately impacts students of color. What were some challenges of trying to tell this story as white women, and how did you work to acknowledge and navigate those challenges?
Mm-hmm. Well, Beth and I are the ones that are on this call, but the co-director of the film, Eddie Martinez, is not on the call. So we didn't make the film alone. There were actually a lot of other people involved. And I would say that the other way in which we approached it, given, like, as I said earlier, like my experience growing up was entirely different, was that and Caroline and Enoch, you guys can add to this, but like we approached it really in collaboration with the subjects. So, we were asking, them, like, what story needs to be told? What story do you want to tell? And therefore, when should we be showing up? What should we be filming? So, I think that you have to definitely, as a white person, anytime you're making a film about something that's not your own personal experience, I think one way to address that is to really work in collaboration with the people whose experience it is. Caroline and Enoch, do you guys want to add anything about that?
I would say I'd agree with you, and you could kind of see how throughout the whole process of creating the film, scrupulous behavior was like directed towards understanding our perspectives and understanding what we were going through, and it was absolutely welcomed and embraced, and it was understood by all involved, including like my family. I mean, I assume it was the same for you, Caroline, too, right? Because it gets sticky sometimes, when you do it stuff like this, and this my family, on the other hand, had their issues. I'm not gonna lie, because it's always strange when your brother, your son comes home and you're like, hey, there's this documentary getting done on me, and they're like, okay, that's great, and they're like, hey, they're coming inside, and now everyone has to like get accustomed to that atmosphere, and then really it has to grow on them. And Julie and Beth and everyone else involved did an amazing job just conveying how they're here for us and we are all in this together in a collaborative work.
I totally agree. This was definitely done as a team. And I'm just grateful for Julie too, for as a, using that privilege and, to help us get our voices out there. We kind of just became like a family kind of thing, because my family loves Julie and I have just so many good memories. I remember like one day we were filming, and Julie was like under my bed. Julie was under my bed trying to film a scene with my sister and I, and it just became like a habit for me to just always call Julie and to just always be like, Julie, can I come over? Julie, I need you, because it's not just about the film. This is about me and her being there for each other, me being there for Enoch, me being there for Christine. Since we're closer, we have that kind of like relationship, family relationship. We're there for each other. We've grown together so much and I wouldn't trade this for the world. So yeah.
Cool.
I would like to add that Julie was my sister's doula at her last pregnancy. Just saying. It was a very intense day.
Oh my.
So yeah, she's definitely part of the family.
Family, for sure. Yeah.
I just want to add, I mean, I think that's a totally legitimate question. And it's certainly a question that's coming up in filmmaking now, like who gets to tell whose stories. And I think it's really meaningful that Eddie Martinez, who's a brown person, you know, was the co-director, shot a lot of the film, edited the film for a long period of time. And that Julie really is a very spectacular and unusual person who didn't just sort of like dive in, get the stories and leave, but has really stayed with you guys for like how many years now, and really been a guide and a trusted confidant and so many things. So it's a really important question, and yet I think that the question also, those questions have to be explored through kind of complex lenses sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So let's shift gears a little bit. You know, Beth, congratulations to you. Apart from the team that sort of day-to-day guts it out, although it sounds like you were frequently on location as well, but you know, for lending your support, for being receptive to being open to a project like this, which is not going to immediately stand out as a huge commercial prospect, but one that is important. And your most recent film, let's talk a little bit about that, because we're going to look at a trailer for it and maybe get a little bit of conversation going there.
Yeah, I also just want to say one thing, that every film has to have its own definition of success. And commercial success is not always the right definition or the only definition. And I guess what I would say, which is so amazing for me to be on this call, is that, you know, this film, its longevity, its impact, its creating structural change, I mean, it's so incredibly successful, you know what I mean? And I'm sure, I think, you know, every filmmaker has to have their own definition of success. And I just think by any measure, like this film like knocks it out of the ballpark. So yeah. Anyway, I just want to add that, like sometimes we can have such a narrow lens on success.
Sure. Which is part of the problem. I mean, you create social capital here, and these number of years later, it's continuing to generate new activity, new ideas, new people connected to not just the film, but to engaging with each other and changing their lives, really. And so, yes, it's absolutely essential, and
yeah,
it's what the cultural sector is supposed to be about.
Totally. Like for some films, finishing your film, getting it funded, that can be a version of success and a totally viable one.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a look at the trailer for your new film. Well, for one of your new films, I know you're working on a number of projects, but a film that focuses on the elevation of a woman chief of police in Minneapolis, of course, Minneapolis being very much in the news these days. If you can set that up for us a little bit and we can take a look at the trailer, that'd be great.
Yeah, so basically from 2017 to 2019, we were in production from 2017 to 2019. So, but we just released into the world a film called Women in Blue, directed by a woman named Deirdre Fishel. And the film was actually it was a Tribeca 2020 selection, but Tribeca hasn't happened. And then it went on and was the closing night film of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. And so we screened there virtually, and then 36 hours later, George Floyd was killed. And we really kind of found ourselves in the center of a national story. So the film is about gender, race, and violence in American policing through the eyes of female cops with the Minneapolis Police Department.
It's called Women in Blue.
It's called Women in Blue. Yep. So we're going to watch actually a scene that features Sergeant Alice White, who is one of the main protagonists of the film. The film focuses on for female cops, and Alice is one of them. And it's a scene where we get a window into her and her approach to her work as a cop. And I'll just say that the quality of this clip is not great because Phoebe is sharing her screen, but we decided, you know, better to share, give a sense than no sense at all.
Thank you.
423 up and out the north.
Dude, 405 traffic. Hi. Do you know why I'm stopping you? You can calm down. I see you're shaking. Just relax. Relax. It's all good. You should have waited, let that car go straight, and then you made your left-hand turn. That's what alerted me to you, okay? All right. Do you have a valid driver's license?
I don't.
Okay.
But I was just dropping a friend off, and I was like, okay, fine.
So that's why you're nervous?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going to take you to jail for not having a valid driver's license. That's for sure. Okay. Do you have any warrants or anything?
I don't have any warrants.
Anything in the vehicle that I should be concerned about? Okay. All right. I'll be right back with you, okay? All right. I'm not going to give you a ticket for the driving after suspension. I can't allow you to drive this vehicle, though, so you're going to have someone come pick it up. I'm not going to tow it either, okay? Have a better day. Yep. All right. Like when I walked up to that guy, he was obviously shaking. I know that fear. Your heart starts racing. Even as a police sergeant, I still know what it's like to feel nervous when the police get behind me. I just tell people, don't be nervous. I don't want to add to the trauma.
Cool. Great. So this is extremely timely. De-escalation.
Yeah.
So tell me, so where is the film going to go? And you said you were suddenly with the Minneapolis developments, you found yourself, you know, part of the conversation. And so just curious to hear some of that.
Yeah, you know, so, you know, that's Alice White. One of the other cops that we followed was the inspector of the 3rd precinct, which was the precinct that was burned down to the ground. And so what's really interesting is that, you know, basically the film, we started filming in 2017 when Minneapolis had a woman police chief. And she was one of only 5 women chiefs in the US of a major police department, urban police department. And that's why we started filming with the Minneapolis Police Department. We also started filming with that department because that was a police department really working at reform. And it had been targeted as a possible model for reform. And but it had a lot of issues. They were really working at trying to become a better police department. And so we started filming, and then 4 months into the filming, Justine Damon, who was an Australian woman, a yoga teacher, was shot in her back alley. She was a white woman shot by a Black officer, and Minneapolis had so much violence already. There was Philando Castile, there was Jamar Clark, there were other shootings, and the city just exploded. And Janae Harteau, the female chief, was forced to resign. And at that point, Medaria Arredondo, the current chief, was promoted. He had been the assistant chief. And in his rise to chiefdom, he promoted all white men over women who had been in positions of power. It was an unusual police department also because it did have women in leadership at multiple levels. So really we followed for 2 years sort of the experience of the officers who we had started filming with, Janae, Alice, CJ at the 3rd precinct. And, you know, and we filmed through June of 2019. And what is really interesting is that given the events, you know, surrounding George Floyd's killing, it's really, the film may in some ways be the prequel to these events. And in some ways it shows the ways and the limitations of incremental reform. And so it's really become, it's really like a time capsule, which is really interesting. At the same time, as you know, sort of once these events transpired, we sort of realized that to look at the film today is a very different experience from, let's say, watching the film when viewers did at the Minneapolis St. Paul International Film Festival before George Floyd's death. So, so we are actually now screening the film at festivals across the US as a work in progress. And we are now raising money to update the film, probably reframe it a little bit because it would just be really tone deaf in some ways for us to show it nationally exactly as it is. And it is currently targeted for broadcast on Independent Lens on public television in February of 2021. So we are actually, you know, you think the movie's done and then the world changes in a really substantive way. And so we're going back in and bringing the film kind of up to date to some degree as much as we can. Yeah, so it looks like we're actually going to be shooting in about 2 weeks. We've started a little bit, but we're going to be filming again in about 2 weeks. Yeah.
What will be, is there a focus that you're taking into it? Something that you really want to fill as a gap that you see? Something
well, yeah, I mean, you know, we're going to, it's really a character-based film as much as it has also kind of a classical 3-act structure. So we're going to go back and film with Alice White, who was always, you know, kind of, as she herself said, she was torn between being black and blue, and kind of what these events have meant for her. Janae Harteau, the original chief, has been very outspoken. Nikema Levy-Pounds, who is a community activist, has been very involved in demanding change toward creating a, well, she wants to see the police department done away with completely, but we will return to her and just sort of reframing certain scenes that we perhaps even understand now from a slightly different lens than we even did a year ago. I mean, I think we all have really new perspectives. And then also, I mean, what's interesting is, and perhaps naively, and it relates to this earlier question, this film really started out as a film about gender and policing. And the filmmaker had this idea that, you know, women currently make up 13% of police forces nationwide. So, you know, whenever you have that degree of an imbalance, it sort of raises an eyebrow or raises issues. So we originally really started out as being a film about gender, and we had an all-women team. And then as the film evolved, Alice White really sort of came into the forefront because she was just so compelling, like everything that she was dealing with, and being a cop, but being torn between being black and blue, and being so aware of that and vocal about that, and not telling people that she was a cop, but telling them that she worked for the city. And so for the film, we brought on a woman of color as the editor, which we felt was really important to have in a key role, a person of color. And I think now when we think about going back, especially what's going on in the world, we're really looking at really crewing up with a Black team. And I've even said in this case, like, I want what's best for the film. And if I need to step aside for another producer to take it across the finish, I'm really okay with that. So we're looking at the film through a new framework, kind of both editorially and creatively, and in terms of the team and so many things. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, great that you're flexible and open and understanding the moment. I mean, that's as much as anything in today's world, understanding the moment is really key. And another film that will change the conversation, and you're to be congratulated for continuing to, make these connections, make these things possible. So I think we're pretty much at the end of our time, but this has really been fabulous and so wonderful to have all of you as part of this, symphony of voices, really about engagement and change and changing the conversation. And both Enoch and Caroline, I remember seeing you and spending time with you when you came to Middlebury, and you've grown since then in all the right ways. And congratulations, for the work that you continue to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to ask Julie to let all the participants today, all the attendees know is if someone would like to make a donation to the We Belong in College campaign, tell them how and when, and we will publicize that following this. We will use our newsletter and our social media platforms to do that. But could you for a moment just talk about where people can send contributions?
Yeah. So if folks want to support the college expenses of the main subjects of the film, there is a button to do that on Personal Statement Film's website. It's personalstatementfilm.com. And then if you're interested in supporting a scholarship, additional scholarships, so that more students can get We Belong in College scholarships, and that will enable us to sustain this national campaign beyond October 2020. Each of those scholarships, right now they're $1,000 scholarships. We will have a portal that we can share with you to do that directly. But and that Lloyd, I think you'll be able to email it to everybody on this call. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about it, you can email me directly. And can I just go ahead and put my email in the chat and everyone can have it?
Absolutely.
Anything also, if you can indicate how people can see Personal Statement if they have not seen it, if you could put that on the chat, that would also be great. Also, Beth mentioned in the chat that she was also involved with the picture Ernie and Joe, which is another one of our favorite pictures, which is also about the very important work in San Antonio, Texas, of de-escalation and just sort of rethinking the notion of policing, which is extremely relevant right now, although I hear that Joe may be leaving the police force at the end of the summer, which is very sad to say. But in any case, so how can people see the film?
That film is available, by the way, Jay, on HBO's YouTube channel for free through July 15th, Ernie and Joe, Crisis Cops. So if someone has not watched it, just go ahead and search on HBO's YouTube channel, and it's right there.
Absolutely. Okay.
I'd like to make an announcement. This is totally preemptive, but the Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival is going to make a $500 donation to the We Belong in College campaign. As a result, I found this today to just be spectacular panel, and to have the sort of reawakening our connection to the film. It's not about the past. The past, when we screened it, it was a revelation. But to see what's happened going forward is just amazing. And I hope that our attendees recognize the impact in the broadest sense that this film has had and will continue to have, because it's one of these documentaries that found at its core something that really did need to change. And in having the two protagonists here with us today, you have sort of a living embodiment of how change gets made. And between Caroline and Enoch today, and of course Julie's ongoing guidance and energy, it's just spectacular. I applaud you. And really, for us, it's just, I don't know, we're one of these festivals that we get attached to our people. And so anyway, on behalf of Jay and Phoebe, and of course all the folks at Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival, we just want to offer this donation to keep the scholarship program going. And if anybody in our attendees group would like to do likewise, we will have a link, or we'll have the information up fairly soon. And I urge you to do this, because there are very few causes where you can donate and think, this is really going to make a change. This is really going to help somebody. It's not some vague sort of amorphous contribution. It is the real deal. Well, that's my spiel.
Great.
Anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Lloyd.
Come back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. A little bit of housekeeping before we go. First of all, Jay, great questions today, Jay. Fantastic. Thank you. And Phoebe, as always, for shepherding the tech on this. And for those who are interested in what's going to happen at the Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival come August 27, we will be online with this. And of course, we'll be publicizing it in very frequently. Our tickets and passes will go on sale through our website beginning on August 1st. What I can tell you today is we're planning on screening roughly 20 features and about 35 shorts in 6 collections that Jay has put together. I think it's going to be a good festival. To be honest with all of you, it's hard to build an online festival. So when you do see one, whether it's ours or anybody else's, realize that behind the scenes, wow, it's a hard thing to put together. We're learning about technology. We're learning about how to present online in ways that keep you engaged. And I don't want to forget that also Jay will be doing Q&As with a good variety of the filmmakers. I'm not sure if he'll do all 20, but knowing Jay, he might. And I think those will be something to look forward to. So please, if you are subscribed to our newsletter, great. You'll see more about that soon. If you don't, go to MidFilmFest, MIDD, midfilmfest.org and sign up for our newsletter. And stay tuned because I think
we'll also have Barbara Koppel back this year showing one of her new films, Desert One, about the failed rescue attempt of the hostages that were kidnapped in Iran under Jimmy Carter's administration. Also, just today, we confirmed that the great British film director Ken Loach will be with us for an interview and also screening of his new film and also one of his earlier films.
Yes.
So we're excited about it. One of the things we don't understand, which Lloyd's saying, with a lot of things we're trying to figure out, part of what we're trying to figure out is the audience. And so anybody that can help spread the word, be very grateful.
Yes, yes. So anyway, thank you all. This will be the last Craven conversation because as I said at the opening, we kind of have to like hunker down now and get this festival made and ready for all of you. But to Julie, to Beth, to Caroline, to Enoch, thank you. Really such a pleasure to have you all back with us. And as a final Craven conversation, I don't think we could have topped this. So we're going to say goodbye to everybody and we'll stay in touch. And don't forget to watch the MNFF Short of the Week as we continue to promote our short filmmakers on a weekly basis from MNFF 5 and we think from previous festivals in the weeks to come. Thank you, everybody. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
See you later.
COVID-19 in the quarantine place has been one of the top most difficult things in my life.
This is really serious.
We have all been worried and heartbroken.
I really don't know how I'm gonna pay for my college.
I have lost 2 of my jobs.
All of us are going through it.
I am not standing alone, and you are not standing alone.
We just gotta keep pushing through this.
Get on a schedule. Like, everyone's saying it because it works.
We have worked too long and hard to stop now.
I do believe that I belong in college,